Humans have a love-hate relationship with change. We need it for growth and variety, and yet we hate the upheaval it brings into our lives. Resilience seems to be the answer. So let's explore a new kind of conversation where we look at the turbulence of change and the resilience that enables us to not only survive it, but to truly thrive from it. I'm Paula Shaw, life transition expert, grief counseling specialist, and author. I'll be spotlighting influential people on this podcast, people who have taken the steps to change it up. So join us as we share valuable information to help you navigate the rocky waters of change. Come on, jump on in. Welcome to Change It Up Radio. So glad you're here. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and I get to interview someone today who not only do I want to share with you because she has a ton to say and a lot of amazing growth that I know she'll want to share, but she's also one of my dearest friends and someone that I get to work with in a nonprofit that's called Voice for Heroes. She founded it and I got to jump on board, and it's a very exciting opportunity for us to give a voice and a media presence to nonprofits and community organizations that are trying to make the world a better place, that may serve veterans, that may serve other populations who are in need. And I feel so blessed and so privileged that we get to do that. But today, we're not going to be talking as much about Voice for Heroes as we are about the grief that can so often be experienced by single mothers. Whoa, it's a big one, isn't it? So most of you who have been following the show, you know that the theme this season is a season of grief. And we've been looking at grief from many, many different perspectives. Grief from the perspectives of a football player who had concussion damage, a school administrator who works with foster children, a sister whose twin was killed. We've looked at grief in so many ways, in so many places. We've looked from the perspective of helpers, those coaches and professionals who are working with grieving people, and the perspective of those who are grieving or who have grieved. My guest today, Amy Scruggs, is going to be chatting with me about the difficulties and also the blessings of being a single mom. You know, I've done that myself. I know many of you have too. And I will say that I was fortunate enough that I had family. I had a former husband who contributed to trying to get our children raised and give them all that we wanted them to have to benefit them in school and in their lives. But sometimes women have to do it all alone. And I think many women out there who are in bad relationships, perhaps bad marriages, you know, they suffer a different kind of grief before that marriage even ends. And that's the grief that they're suffering being in a bad relationship, having lost the dreams that they got married with, the hopes and the dreams and the, you know, all of the stuff that we fantasize about or just basically dream about when we first get married. It's very scary one day to wake up and realize those dreams are gone. This marriage is not working. This marriage may even be a living hell. And now there are these little people who you love more than you ever thought you could love anything or anyone. These children that you have to take care of. And that man that you always dreamed, or that partner that you always dreamed would be there by your side to help, is not going to be there. There are so many levels to that kind of grief. There's so many levels just to making the decision that you need to go. The decision that what's happening here is not healthy for these children. Our guest last week, Marjorie Saylor, talked about growing up in a home where the stepfather was abusing all three children, herself and her siblings. And her mother was doing her best to just try and make it happen, but she was just wasn't tuned in, or maybe was terrified to be tuned in to how really awful it was for the children. But when that moment comes, when you know, as Marjorie's mother finally did know, there can be no more of this for these children. What, even if I have no idea how I'm going to feed them, even if I have no idea how we will survive, I have to go. I have to end this relationship for the sake of these children. I know there are many of you out there who've had to make that choice, and it's tough. It's really tough because part of you is thinking, well, at least if I stay here, I can try to control the situation and they'll have food and shelter. But sometimes emotional damage is a more expensive price to pay than hunger or an insecurity about where you're going to stay. And when that decision comes, to say that it's a grief experience is, I think, sort of like saying Niagara Falls is a waterfall. You know what I mean? It's just a huge and difficult time for a man or a woman, anyone who has to make that choice. So I would like you to meet someone who is very special to me, who made that choice and who was able to do it successfully. So let me bring her on in just a moment so that you can hear it all from her. Her name is Amy Scruggs, and she has been known in country music for more than 15 years, opening for greats including Clint Black, Trace Adkins, Charlie Daniels, and many more. She has had a 20-year career in sales and coaching and achieved bestseller status for her book, Lights, Camera, Action. Today, she uses her experience as a media executive, TV host, recording artist, and public speaker to help others. And I am very proud to call her friend, Amy Scruggs. Please join us.
Hello, my beautiful friend.
How are you this morning?
I loved hearing you say the word success when you said she's done it with success. And instantly I'm like, ooh, that's a big word. How do we even define that? And I think we're going to address some of that because there's those moments, especially when you're in it, as we're going to discuss, that do not feel like success. And that's a difficult word because I think we're the hardest on ourselves. And I still don't see it that way.
Well, let's start at the very beginning, Amy. Not the very, very beginning, but what was going on in your life at this time when you had to make the choice that I was just talking about, when you realized that the marriage was not working? And where were you? How many children did you have, and how was it?
Well, it's interesting, Paula. I have had the experience of maybe going through this a few times. But that first one that really roots back is 32 years when I had my oldest son, because I was only 18 and I had him alone. So I had the choice at 18 to keep the baby or give him up and have him by myself. And I chose to have him. And so that started a path since I was still a child. I was still a child.
You were.
When I became responsible and became an adult and was now responsible for this other human. So every decision I make as I'm in those growing years of awkwardness and making dumb decisions and figuring myself out, I already had to be a parent to this little boy.
Mm.
And I don't know any different, and it's only now at this age that they're grown that I've looked back to see where those moments of grief were in that, because I wasn't able to identify grief until later in the game here because
Mm.
it's so much in survival mode. And that's what happens a lot, especially as single parents. So I went through that time as a single parent with Ryan, where I was waiting tables and being done with my shift at 2 a.m. and picking him up and counting our dollars to make sure that I could feed him. And I had my little apartment, and that was scary. I think there was some naivety in me that allowed me to maybe overlook a lot of what was taking place there. And I had no idea what was ahead. I ended up marrying and having the other children, and then now become a single mom again. And I have 4 kids. And
Mm.
that was terrifying to say,
Oh,
how
oh,
do we do this?
mm.
What does this look like? And some tough decisions in that as well that we can discuss, that the
Yeah.
economy played a huge role. It's one thing to say, all right, I have to face this and I have to feed everyone and we have to survive and forge through my different careers. But when the economy and the world takes a different shift, like I'm sure a lot of single mothers are dealing with
Yes.
right now,
Right.
those are even more difficult decisions. And that's what I ended up facing, I believe, multiple times.
So let me ask you this. When you had to leave, when were there 4 children at that time, or okay,
Yes.
there were 4 children. What were the circumstances? What made you feel
Mm.
that it was better to try to figure it out on your own than stay married?
Mm, it was not my decision. That
Wow.
he forced that hand, and that was his decision. He just wasn't in a place to be ready for that kind of responsibility. He
I
just
see.
needed to go find his way. And we're great friends today. So there's
Mm.
nothing I want to share except for the fact that he had to walk his own path and
Yes.
find his way.
Yeah.
And it left us to say, okay, we can do this. I can do this.
Mm.
It's not what I would have ever wanted for the kids.
Of course. Of course. And, you know, I have to say too, I I think that something that is unrealistic in our society is this belief that everybody knows exactly what they're doing and they're exactly ready in the moment that they say I do. And the truth is people's lives evolve, things change, people change. And I understand that, even though it sure put you in a tough position. You know, how great that you were able to remain friends over all these years.
Mm.
One of the things I tell clients all the time in my private practice is, you know, if just because you've realized this marriage can't work doesn't mean that all those things that attracted you to each other or that brought you together or that created this love can't survive, you know, that this
Mhm.
love, this friendship can't survive. Obviously, the living together part isn't working, but maybe, you know, somehow I think we think if we divorce somebody, we're supposed to hate them.
Mm.
Or, you know, if somebody has different needs than are working for us, that we're supposed to just walk away in a huff
Right.
and never want to speak to them again. So I respect that, Amy, that that you were able to do that, especially
Mhm.
because you went through tough times. It wasn't like you were left with a big trust fund.
Right. No, we had no safety net, and even grieving what, let's say, I wanted that to be or what I thought he should be,
Mhm.
right? I had to grieve that and say, what is it though? I'm going to choose to be happy. And doesn't mean there weren't hard times or times maybe I want to strangle him. I mean, still, of course, but forgiving and going past and realize that my focus needed to be on our survival. My focus needed to be on us being okay, on putting food on the table, on accomplishing, on trying to make things work and create things out of nothing, which was making the lemons out of lemonade. If I put any of that energy into who he isn't or what he couldn't do or any of those dynamics maybe of the role he would have played, it just
Mhm.
would have pulled me away from what I needed to be doing. And I feel for 32 straight years I've been in survival mode continually over and over again,
Yeah.
especially with careers that come and go and industries and economies that go up and down, because
Yes.
at the end of the day those 4 are my responsibility.
Mhm.
Even as adults, it's harder now because I know that I don't want them to suffer in the ways. When I was touring those years, when I was out on the road, so the economy crashed in 2007, right?
Right.
So at that time, I had just had a full hysterectomy, and I
Mm.
had a great job in wholesale mortgage where I was able to provide,
Mhm.
and that industry disappeared overnight while I was recovering from major surgery.
Oh, wow. Oh
And
my.
there were decisions that had to be made.
Mhm.
Big time. Well, I already had the passion for music and performing, and so all I did was put a full-time plan into that instantly. Again, survival.
Mhm.
When I went out and toured and all those times, working with the veterans, we were spokesperson for the American veterans and singing and on the road, most of the time those kids were with me. The youngest was in a car seat driving around on tour with a band and putting our music out there and at the county fairs all over the country and different veteran and military events. It was great experiences. And I love the fact that they were able to have experiences that other kids couldn't have, right?
Mhm.
I mean, private tours on a military base and they get to sit in a fighter jet and private tour of a gold mine and all of these things. But it's interesting when I listen to my two middle boys who are now in their early 20s and the second son, he says, what I remember about that time was hungry, tired, waiting for mom.
Oh,
Hungry, tired, waiting for mom because
wow.
they couldn't eat till I finished performing because we had to make the money performing, sell merchandise, and then everybody could eat. They
Mm.
were really hungry. There
Mm.
were so many times of hunger. There were times in the middle during that recession where it just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to pay the mortgage, to pay and keep the lights on, to feed all of them, to
Mm.
do what we needed, the fuel in the car to get to the next town, pay the band members, all the things that we had to do just wasn't enough some days. And
Mhm.
there were many times we were so thankful to receive our food from the food bank. We would show up on Tuesday mornings with our laundry baskets. And then I'd have a show performing for the veterans the same night, but we ate because we were provided for that way. And that's the memory of my youngest daughter still remembers standing there with the laundry basket at 3, 4 years old so that
Oh.
we could have those provisions. And that's not anything that I want my kids as adults to experience. There's grief there. Like, what could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? I was proud of the work I was doing,
Mhm.
but what if? Could I have saved them some of that heartache? Could I
Mm.
have saved them some of that, teaching them that lack or that feeling of lack? And they still go through that of worrying about having enough. I see them continuing on some of those mindsets of scarcity.
Yes.
And I have such grief and such sadness for that time period of what it was. Now we are bonded, we're close, we came together, but that was a lot for them. They were little. They
Mm.
were 8 and 10 and I mean it was the baby was 3. I mean it was just not easy.
No. Oh, not at all. And I share a lot of those feelings with you, Amy, because when my husband and I divorced, it was kind of a similar thing. There was money and he was still around and he would help with the kids, but I had this terror. I mean, I would wake up, I called it the morning terrors. I'd wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I just go, and
Yeah.
then I'd start running through this list of, is this paid? Is that paid? What's happening here? Are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to be, it was just terrifying. I remember that so clearly.
Since I was 18, I have experienced that same thing.
Uh, and it's awful, especially because, as you're so clearly expressing, you love these kids so much. And you want them to have the best of everything. Every parent wants that. But
Yes.
if you don't have the means, you don't have the means. And then to hear their memories of it,
Yeah.
which is so interesting, isn't it? Because children are just so basic. It's like, this is completely off topic, but I remember killing myself to take my kids on a vacation. Actually, I think we were still married at the time. We took them on this vacation up into Oregon and to see all these incredible sights. The happiest day for them?
Oh
When
no.
we got to a motel with a swimming pool.
That's what they wanted.
Motel with a swimming pool. That was the day they talked about on that vacation for years to come. So my point is, as a parent, you don't know what they're remembering.
Right.
You don't know if, that day you're thinking, oh, this is so cool. They're getting to tour a jet. But what they really might remember most is how good that hot dog tasted that they got finally, at the end of the day. And I think that's the thing as a parent, our children are so basic, especially when they're young. They want to be happy, they want to be fed, and they want to be able to move and play and do things. And so the impression I'm getting from your story is, did you go right into singing when the divorce happened and you were responsible for the children, or did you have the other career in mortgages first?
I had the other career mortgages first, and then the collapse happened. And so the divorce happened shortly after that. And so I had just started saying, okay, I need to sing. And that was when it was rocky. There's some middle time in there where it had to have its slow dissolve. I mean, it was really difficult. So he was with us for some of that, and then he was out. And that was challenging. And he wasn't able to provide at the time either. And so my singing was literally trying to provide for everyone.
Wow.
And we did it. I mean, we were on some of the most amazing stages in our work with the veterans. And I was so proud to say, I'm going to create this. We're not going to sit here and drown. I have a talent, I have a skill, and I have a business plan in motion. And so for that, I can look back and see that it's still a foundation for everything I get to do today. Yeah. But the grief in the middle is those that had to go through that hardship with me to make that happen.
Absolutely.
And it was my boys. And, it's interesting. My oldest to this day says that he will never eat pancakes or eggs ever again, because that was what we would have a lot of, because it was affordable. You can just make up a big batch of pancakes.
Right.
and the youngest boy remembers that he could never have a glass of milk because we had to save it for sister. So it's interesting to see those that food insecurity that is so ingrained in the boys.
When I was a child, it was always just these very small glasses of juice, orange juice, that we were allowed to have. And I remember thinking, when I grow up, I'm going to have big glasses of orange juice and I'm going to have all I want. And that's kind of thinking, that's where kids are. And it's interesting that you share that about your kids, that's what they remember. Hey, Amy, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit about how did you put this together? I assume you had a band, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what that time was like. We'll be right back.
Is living in today's fast-paced world making you feel stressed and out of balance? Are anxiety, sleeplessness, depression, lack of focus, or weight gain robbing you of your relationship and your energy? If you're ready for change, you need to call Paula Shaw. Paula helps you identify and eliminate self-sabotaging thinking and behavior. Using a wide variety of mind-body techniques, she provides her clients with the most effective processes for their specific needs. To book a session with Paula, call 858-480-9234. That's 858-480-9234.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and with me today is Amy Scruggs, who is a singer. She is a TV host. She's a media coach. She has got tons of credentials, but most important to me, she is my friend. But we are talking today about the grief of being a single mother, trying to provide for your children and give them all the things that they need when times are hard.
Yes.
And Amy has been through all of that. And we are just now talking about when she had to go on her own because there was a financial crisis in the country and the job she was working no longer existed. And now it was time to get creative, which fortunately she is. And Amy, what did you come up with?
I said, it's time to go on tour. I had been performing all over Southern California for years. I had been to Nashville and recorded before. Music was always at the the foundation of who I am. I started playing piano at 3, singing since I was 5. So performing came very naturally. And since I was a child, I'd always thought I was going to grow up and be Barbara Madrell. So that game plan of what I wanted to do for a living was always there. And had I not become a mother at 18, I would have started that. That's exactly the direction I would have gone, was to that first and performing. But I didn't do that because I had to provide for Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And so here is an opportunity years later. And there was no other choice. There wasn't, I mean, there were other options, but why not? If there was ever a chance, because everything had fallen out, the bottom came out underneath the mortgage and real estate industry.
Yeah.
I now had some business skills and sales skills. I had been a sales manager. So I had some really key ingredients in my toolbox that if I was going to go out do this successfully, and it had to be all family events because my children had to come. So I wasn't going to go hit the clubs and the bars. That was what we could do. It had to be that. And so I did. I put the first band together. What's interesting is that my oldest at this time now was about 16. He had started playing guitar when he was about 12. So he started playing alongside the other guys, and then he kept getting better. So then he became our guitar tech, road crew. He turned 18 on tour, which, gosh, it's crazy. He turned 18 on tour. And he was running the ship for us, and we bumped him up to full-time with the band at that stage. And within the next year, he was my lead guitar player. So here I had the younger ones helping, selling merchandise along, but the oldest ended up being my right hand in music and serving the military with me, writing music for me. And I would have never seen that coming when I had him at 18. And I think it's so beautiful. But with that now, the others see that there's that bond with he and I, that there's something special there. Here he is, that firstborn, that 18-year-old pregnancy is now my lead guitar player. It's the Ryan and Amy show. And the other 2 boys are like, wait a minute. It was very, and I still know that is difficult, how they had to find their place, and they were hungry and they were tired for the mom and Ryan show. And then help watch the baby. There was so many dynamics there that I can now see through their eyes and not through mine. And I'm doing what I have to do. I mean, it was providing, it was feeding everybody. That was the plan. That's what we did. And we were proud of what we were doing. But I look back now and see how hard that was for them. They're grown now. They're living their lives. And it's now that I can look back and have to start addressing that with them and discussing it and making sure that they feel loved and fulfilled, and that they know that I see them and that I validate what they had to go through, the sacrifices they made for us. I think their sacrifices were much greater than mine.
You know, I'm so glad that you went in that direction, because that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because we've been talking about the grief of the single mother. But yeah, there's also grief that the children go through in maybe not having as much as other children, not having the same stability, not having a dad present. You know, when a few weeks ago we were talking with Jenna Mendez about foster children, and we were looking at all the losses that come when these children are taken away from their parents, their home, the parent, the school, the friends, all those things. So your children, I can see living this kind of nomad life, and the insecurity, the inconsistency that has to come when you don't know where that money is going to come from, that's going to buy food that week. That is huge. And
it was a lot to ask of them at a young age. The boys were like 9 and 11 at the time, 8, 10, 9, 11, 12, 13, into that time frame. And it was really tough for them. You know, Ryan was okay because he was the one on stage. He's kind of gone into that rock star point where he was loving it. He was about the music. He didn't mind the sacrifice. He had something vested in this decision.
Right.
But the other 2 did not.
No. And Elisa was really young then, right?
She was so young. She was 3, 4.
Oh my goodness.
We were touring. And then another heavy decision was having to stop it, because now she needed to start first grade. And at the same time, we lost our home. It wasn't enough. We lost our home.
Ah.
And we had to make some tremendous decisions. So here, what we were barely keeping together now came out from underneath us, and we lost everything.
Mm.
And I
Oh.
knew that I was going to have to go back into sales. I still was going to perform, but I knew that the shift had to take place. She needed to start school.
Mhm.
Now she had to become priority. And again, those two boys had to make the sacrifice. So they did end up, Elisa and I moved to San Diego together, the two of us,
Mhm.
to start over, to put her in school.
And how old were the other boys?
11 and 13.
Oh, and where did they go?
12. They ended up with their dad.
Mm.
So now they are able to be in junior high and high school.
Mhm.
They needed to have that stability. And
Yes.
I couldn't afford to bring them with me. We couldn't afford, I had to start in one room with Elisa and I in a twin bed for her to start first grade. We literally started over again. Losing the house was the last time I was able to live with my boys. And again, Ryan now is 20. He's okay. But
Mhm.
those two boys were at such a critical age that I had to make such hard decisions. Now they're okay. They actually got stability. Their grandmother was able to step in and really be a part of raising them through that junior high and high school time. I drove back and forth as much as possible
Mhm.
and was able to get back on my feet, had a good job, still performing. I was now able to provide things for them that I couldn't before. I
Oh.
would, and so now I was able to financially provide for them, but not be under the same roof, which is the way to go there.
Mhm. Oh,
And Elisa
agony either way.
was able to start. I ended up remarrying about 2 years later. And so we're here in San Diego. She's had a wonderful life. He adores her. She's had stability, a roof over her head, everything she needs, gone all the way through school. And actually, today is her 18th birthday. And I
Oh,
look back, and that hardest thing where you go, just get them to 18, get them to 18. And here
wow.
today is that day that she's 18 and she's in college. And I see how she has thrived.
Mhm.
Ryan is okay. Again, it's my two middle sons that I knew took that hardest part, and the grieving in there for me as a mother, saying, well, who did I sacrifice for the sake of the other? What decisions do you make, especially with the age spread that I had with the kids?
Mhm.
How do you make those decisions while still trying to figure out a career, deal with a volatile economy and industry?
Yeah.
And give myself grace and peace to start over and find happiness as well. How do you make those decisions
Yeah.
knowing someone else that's not what's best for them, but is best for these? There were
Mhm.
too many decisions and too many of them, and it was not going to be the right decision for all of them. And I think that's where I am still dealing with, working through, and going back and asking their forgiveness, which
Mm.
is so huge. And
It
what I love about them is that they're all close. Thank goodness.
mm. And you know what, Amy? I have to say, both professionally and even in my own life, I remember that my dad was always good at saying when he screwed up or saying he was sorry. My mother had a harder time with it.
Mhm.
And I think, and yet, now certainly she looks back at things and can speak very honestly about them. But, when you're a parent, you're doing the best you can. And especially someone like you, but even someone who was older and had the chance to go to college or whatever, you don't learn how to parent really, unless you take parenting classes along the way. There's no parenting 101, or maybe there is today in college. I don't know. But what I find we so often do is we do the best we can, basically mimicking what our parents did, whether it was helpful or not. And so I think to be able at this point in your life to acknowledge to them that was hard.
Mhm.
You went through trauma. There were sacrifices you made that I wish you hadn't had to be able to apologize for that. That's huge for them to hear, because otherwise they feel like they're just bearing the pain all by themselves because
Right.
it's there.
Right.
It's there. But if mom or dad doesn't own their part in it, I've had to do that with my own children too, because there was things that I allowed them to experience because I thought keeping the marriage together was the best way to go. Or I couldn't afford this or I couldn't afford that. So I just get that so
Yes.
big time. Through my whole being, I get how hard that was for you and for them.
Yeah, we were torn into pieces. We were blown apart into pieces, scattered.
Yeah.
And I have to apologize to them for that, because
Mm.
I guarantee I made mistakes. I guarantee I might have been able to navigate a little smoother. I
Uh-huh.
was making so many decisions in such rapid pace, and I feel that since I was 18 is what I've had to do. Big
Yeah.
decisions in real time, without advisory board, like you would have in a business. There's no advisory board.
No.
You're just doing, you're surviving, and they're hungry or they need this. And I feel like it's this constant game of whack-a-mole, even today, trying to help them as adults. One is now this one, you need help moving. Nope, this one's going here. Oh, we have this crisis. Oh, there's a breakup. There's something always taking place, that it's a constant game of whack-a-mole. And then also worrying about, is it even? It's interesting. Even today, I'll notice that the ones that are going through maybe more crises or need more assistance with some adulting decisions or a job loss or things like that I need to help with, the one that doesn't have crises gets the least attention. And then I have to go back and apologize for that. And it's this constant check of, am I at least providing them emotional stability? And thankfully, they all do come to me, and I'm so grateful.
Oh,
But you're right, that apologizing, I think the acknowledging, and there's been some really tough, hard conversations, especially with the middle two boys, as I say, I'm sorry. There are so many things that I missed that I cannot get back. And now that they're grown and starting their lives, and I realize I missed it. I missed so much. But what choice did I have? But I missed it. And there's grief there that I don't know how that heals. And I want it to heal.
Yes. Well, what you're doing is some of the most helpful things you can do. You're talking, it sounds like you have beautiful communication with them, which is the bottom line of how everybody heals. You know, we have to be able to talk about it. We have to be able to own what we did or what we didn't do. And then I think the next piece that is so important is love. And it sounds like you all really have that too. And, you know, I'm still kind of blown away thinking that you had a child at the age Elisa turns today.
I've thought of it. It really hit me. When on my 18th birthday, I was 3 months pregnant. And here she is on her 18th birthday today, finishing her first year of college. She graduated high school a year early.
Oh, wow.
And to see what choices she is able to make for herself. And I can't even fathom her being ready to say, my childhood is over. I'm going to provide for another human. I can't. And yet that's what I did. And my childhood stopped then. When I hear talk about people discuss their crazy early 20s and their college years, I don't have any experience to understand that.
No.
I only understand this other human needs to be fed. This other human needs to be provided for. There needs to be rent money. I only understand that. And with that comes tremendous grief. Also the loss for myself, the grief for what I lost in those years.
Yes.
That I have to also address at the same time I'm grieving the loss of the things I couldn't provide to them. It's this really interesting, I don't want to say midlife crisis, but I think a midlife awakening as I finally look back and allow myself to see some of it for what it was.
Yeah.
And allow myself to process through self-forgiveness, asking their forgiveness, and figure out what pieces are left so that I can embrace these next years and enjoy their adulthood without feeling like I'm still making up for something, because that's the natural instinct, is I still feel I'm making up for it.
Yes. And yet, you know, I think you bring up such an important point, because there comes a point at which we have to forgive ourselves so that we can go forward and stop apologizing, stop trying to make up for the things that weren't there, because that is the past. And, you know, I think from everything I know of you and what you've shared, yes, it was a really difficult time for you and those children. But in the end here, one of the hallmarks of your success is the fact that your daughter's going to school, to college today. Her only focus is on her studies and what she's doing tonight and who her friends are, and all those responsibilities you lived with, you have spared her.
Yes.
And I know that you you do all kinds of things to help the others. And the bottom line is you all do that with each other because you love each other.
We do.
And somehow through all of what went on, the love and the communication between you and those children not only survived, it thrived. And that, I think, is what holds you all together today. That's the success I talked about in the beginning. You have children who love you and who are glad they're your children. And that's huge, Amy. That's huge. You know, all the other successes you've created, you've had songs on the charts, you know, you have a successful media coaching career now. You've done so many things that other people in the world would admire, but nothing matters more than that those kids who are now adults admire you as a human being and as their mother. That's huge. Huge. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk a little more about what you are doing today. We'll be right back. Paula Shaw here. I'm thrilled that LifeWave phototherapy patches, which use no drugs or chemicals, have become a part of my life and my business. My family and I all use their wearable patch technology, and the results are life-changing. My parents in their 90s used the X39 patch, which activates stem cells, reverses aging, and improves the function of every area of the brain. I love X39 because I can work out with the 30-year-olds with no problem. And it's erased my fine lines and given my skin a youthful glow. LifeWave patches use a patented form of phototherapy, frequencies of light, to safely boost health and wellness at the cellular level. No drugs. To learn more, go to my website, lifewave.com/safe health. That's lifewave.com/safe health. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio. I'm your host, Paula Shaw, and with me today is the formidable Amy Scruggs, who is a singer, she's a TV host, she's a media coach, and she's a mom. And we've been talking about some very challenging years that Amy went through when she was divorced and providing for her children on her own. And wow, how long ago was that now, Amy?
Oh, that started in 2008.
2008.
2008. Paula, you have skill. I have to tell you, I've done over 100 interviews in the last 12 months, whether being a host or a guest or all those things. This is the first tears. So thank you very much. This is not a part of my story that I usually share on an interview, but knowing that your show blesses so many lives on grief and really having these hard discussions is why I said, okay, yes. And the fact that this fell on Elisa's 18th birthday feels even more raw and real right now.
And I'm honored that you took the time to do this with me today on her 18th birthday, because I know you have plenty of mother duties that have to happen in celebrating that birthday. And I'm so delighted because I've seen your relationship with Elisa, and because she was the teeniest. She was just barely verbal when you were all touring and doing all of that.
Yes.
And I see now what an accomplished young woman she is. She's doing incredibly well in school. She is personable and likable and fun and funny. And, you have every reason in the world to be proud of her.
Thank you.
And I know that your boys, who are now young men, all have wonderful characteristics and qualities too. And when you were talking about Ryan, wasn't it just a month ago you and Ryan performed together?
We did. We just did another show a couple weeks ago. He's still my lead guitar player, and we hadn't had a chance to do that since before COVID. So to be back on a stage, it was a big conference. We were able to do a live mini concert and to dust off those old moments, and it was funny. I realized, woo, I'm not in my 30s anymore. What are those lyrics again? How does that start? And he carried me like a backpack. He's so talented. And it
Oh.
was really incredible to feel that with him on stage again. We have a magic together that
Mhm.
he knows by my body language what I mean. If I want him to pull back on that tempo, or I'm forgetting lyrics, please repeat the measure until it comes to top of mind. And so he
Yeah.
can read me, and we just have this incredible bond with that, the same way that Elisa and I have bonds in so many other ways through what
Mhm.
we've experienced and been through together, and her growth and how close we are and what a great communicator she is. And I'm over the top with everything. I think the entertainer in me, even
Mm.
the overcompensator, is over the top. So I'm very celebratory. Birthdays are very big. I mean, over the top big, like the entire house is decorated for birthday right now,
Yeah.
just for her to be in it. And I was always that way with the boys, even when I would be able to drive up and see them, it was big.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to know in that moment that they had 100% of me, even if it's only for a few hours. I'm
Mhm.
going to make it as big as if it was a 6-week vacation together. And I'm so rooted in that, of letting them know that they have all of me. And yet I still had so much guilt and grief and doubt that they felt that way. And an example for that is the youngest boy, Matt, just moved out of state just in the last 2
Mhm.
months. So
Yes.
of course I was worried sick and want to make sure he has what he needs, and just realizing though that, wait a minute, now he's gone. This isn't just he went away on vacation. He's gone. He's starting a new life in 2 states away.
Mm.
So I'd promised him I would go up and visit as soon as possible so that he didn't feel alone where he was.
Mhm.
And I got there and I realized that it's time that I really start sharing with the boys as well the grief I'm dealing with dealing with that time period of the time that I missed. Because I don't think I had asked their forgiveness, but I hadn't shared with them that I'm actually dealing with grief. And it
Yes.
became really important to me that I actually let them see that part of me. They've seen the strong mom, the resourceful mom, the go-getter, that will make it happen. We'll find it and we'll shake the trees. I'm the administrative executive to all of them, but the grieving mom they had not seen. And
Ah.
so I took him aside and I asked his forgiveness for the years that I missed.
Mm.
And I told him, I need you to know that I'm grieving, that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for all that you're accomplishing and for your move. But my heart is hurting. That's because I realized all that I missed. And now it's done in your life, in your 2 states away.
Yeah.
And I will never forget his response to me as long as I live, because he looked at me and said, Mom, you are standing here in the middle of Idaho. I think I know how much you love me. Look where you're standing. You got on a plane and you're standing here in the middle of Idaho just to tell me this. I
Oh.
think I know. And he gave me that beautiful little phrase,
Mm.
gave me some more healing that needed to come in that
Yes.
dynamic from
Yes.
him.
And you had the courage to acknowledge it, to own that, maybe you could have done it differently or better, and to ask his forgiveness. That's so huge.
Mhm.
Too often parents don't ask for the forgiveness. They just
I've
keep
never been
trying
asked.
doing things, right? They
Right.
just keep trying to do things. And yeah, I don't think I was asked either, now that I think about it, but
It's
my
not a
children,
conversation I've had.
they always let me know where I stood. So
Right.
I probably have asked for forgiveness at some point in time. But I think, I say this to clients all the time and to people in my life. I've never ceased to be astounded by the power of words unspoken.
Mm.
And equally, I am astounded by the power of words unspoken, because I've had a lot of those kids whose parents never asked for forgiveness in my office,
Right.
in my therapy practice for years, just dealing with their personal agony that nobody ever owned, that they could have had it differently or that they wish it had been different.
Right.
Kids are resilient and kids do love and forgive even abusive parents. But when you own your part And when you can apologize, or even just say, I wish it had been different. I wish I hadn't done that. And, it's kind of freeing for us too. I think I can think of things I've done that I've had to ask my children, or just even own and say, I wish I hadn't done that, or I'm so sorry that I did that. And my children have been wonderfully forgiving as well. But I think there's something freeing for us when we can do it, because we have to own it first before it's going to impact anybody else. And when you finally get the courage to own that didn't go the way I wanted it to, I blew the hat. Or, when you can say those words rather than standing on your position of rightness or arguing it out, that, well, no, I did the best I could. Well, yes, you did. But is it what you wish you would have done?
Right.
And that's what I really hope our listeners are hearing, that sometimes just speaking those words is the most powerful ticket to freedom.
The humanness.
For children and for us. Yeah.
The humanness. I don't feel that, and maybe it was just the time when I grew up, but I don't feel that parents were taught that you should show your kids that you're human.
Right.
I didn't see humanness in the adults around me necessarily growing up. And I want my kids to see me, the woman, the mother, the human, the entrepreneur, that I'm still a kid. My daughter will joke sometimes, like, Mom, I swear you are still 15. I go, yeah, a lot of days I'm still stuck there. I'm glad you see it. So I want them to see the humanness so they can also identify the humanness in themselves.
Yes.
And so that they're not 15 trying to face it.
Yeah, I agree. And if they see that humanness in you, then they can allow it in themselves and forgive it.
Yes.
But I get what you're saying. It was the same with my parents. Like I said, my dad was pretty good at showing his humanness, but I think my mom grew up with that kind of training. I'm your mother. I don't explain anything.
Right.
And
because I said so.
Exactly, because I said
well, that's just the way we did it. So, okay.
Yep, exactly. But it's not really all that hard to own your humanity as a parent. And it can provide so much for the children to see.
And it's going to break generational habits and patterns.
Yes.
I hope that my grief, I hope that my acknowledgement of the grief, my mistakes, and almost falling on the sword and drawing them still into me as adults will change that pattern.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up, because there are many patterns that our poor parents got stuck with, whether it was, saving coupons and fretting over every cent because they were raised by parents who lived through a depression.
Right.
All those patterns don't need to persist. They do need to be broken so that healthier patterns can come along.
Yes.
That's the whole idea of change it up. We don't have to keep doing it the same way. So, Amy, before we run out of time here, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in your life today. And have you been able to give yourself any of those experiences or fulfill any of the dreams that the 18-year-old wasn't able to have?
I am. There are definitely some bucket list moments that have been able to happen that I didn't see coming. I was able to release a new music album just last year. I would have never dreamed at just short of 50, I would finally have the radio hit I always wanted. And it's interesting to even the older kids to say, okay, it's really weird to find you on Spotify and iTunes. Like, I mean, they toured with me, but now to see it really in a virtual and a digital way right in front of them is a big deal. But I think most important, I think my humanness, my empathy, and all of these experiences and tenacity allows me to be a better media and communications coach for my clients, helping other professionals to craft their message, find their words, be comfortable doing interviews just like this, sharing their story in a way that could be impactful and insightful. So I work with professionals on messaging, branding, public relations, communications, and I would have never dreamed that those roads would lead to the fact that this ends up being my best skill set that I bring to the world today. I don't tour. Those days are done. I'm old and tired. I used a digital strategy for the music, which I'm grateful for. I only perform music that's uplifting and positive. And so really switching that up, I was able to write the book. And now the nonprofit, I'm so proud of that we can use these platforms and these skills and this journey to help other nonprofits and other great people making a difference in the community. And that's where I'm so thankful to be at this stage now in life, and then find out what's ahead. But I've definitely learned to take the limits off, and we can always reinvent ourselves. We can always do more. And at the same time, learning how to forgive myself and how to finally deal with the grief that has been pent up for building over 32 years and just compounding. Then now I'm releasing, and I think I will be able to accomplish a lot more and help a lot more people if I take this extra time and really deal with this in the right way.
Oh, I think that is so powerful and so true. And I think, again, I want to reiterate some of the things that you shared today, Amy, that I think are so powerful. First of all, for anybody out there who's in a situation like Amy was, whether you're a male or a female single parent, and doing the best you can to provide not only food and shelter, but emotional support, seeing your children as the human beings they are, listening to what Amy said her children's memories of those times were, remembering that, yes, they're resilient, but they're also little human beings. And they can be traumatized just like we can. And I think, but the other important message is, if you know every day that you're doing the best you can, then forgive yourself, pat yourself on the back, and try to have a spirit of joy in what you do. One of the things I know about Amy is that even though, as she shared, there were some tough times in her life, there is always a spirit of joy in her. And I think, and I have met her children and their spouses, and there is a spirit of joy when you're all together, when you're all loving each other. And it's palpable and it's beautiful to be around. And I'm so grateful that you're my friend, Amy, and I thank you for sharing so many important pieces of this journey with us today, because the grief of single parenting is a huge problem. And even when the other parent is still around, or even when you're sharing custody, there's still so many moments when you feel they're dealing with lack. They're dealing with less than you were hoping they could have. And so I think, you're a beautiful example of someone who got dealt a really rough hand, but did the absolute best you could with it, right down to today, approaching your children and asking for forgiveness for the things that weren't perfect. And you deserve all that love that they give you and that they have for you, Amy.
Oh, thank you, Paula. Thank you for this incredible show that you bring to the world. And thank you for sharing this amazing journey of life with me. I treasure you and our friendship. And to my 4 kids, Ryan, Jeff, Matt, and Elisa, love you dearly.
I don't think there's anything more we can say except thank you to all our listeners and viewers for being with us. And we'll see you next week on Change It Up Radio. Bless you, Amy. Thanks for joining me on Change It Up Radio. I hope you found this episode informative and entertaining. If you want to hear past shows, or you want to get information on being a guest or a sponsor of this show, go to changeitupradio.com. We all know that change is inevitable and it's necessary, but darn it, it's also tricky. My goal is to help you make the experience of change smoother and more productive. If you've benefited from this show, please subscribe to it, share it, and review it. That helps me to tune into what you really want to hear and what you really want to learn more about. Remember, you can find us on every major podcast platform and also on YouTube, Facebook, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. We look forward to seeing you next week for Change It Up Radio.